everybody, Amer back with another Mission Impossible Revival episode review. This time we've got Season 1, Episode 3, which is called Holograms. This one is a remake loosely based on the original series, Season 4 episode called Phantoms. That was an okay episode, and I'll talk during the analysis and after the recap about how they kind of compare with one another. So this one starts with a political opposition leader, Joseph Elias, returning to his country after its dictator for life, Gregory Usher, has been indicted by the U.S. on drug charges. As Elias comes out of his plane, a limo with soldiers drives by and shots are fired all around. First in the air so that everyone ducks, and then a bunch into Elias, who promptly dies. Jim gets his mission instructions through a violinist at a fruit market where we learn about Colonel Gregory Usher, who is the leader of an unnamed country where he rules with an iron fist and quashes all opposition with the help of the nefarious Major Duval. How does he do it? Well, he manufactures cocaine. The mission get Usher onto U.S. soil so that he can be tried and imprisoned. We get an apartment scene where we get an idea of the plan, frankly too much for my liking. There's a fair bit of detail about what the IMF is going to do. Nothing subtle and hints like we used to have in old apartment scenes. A lot of it is laid out for us here. So the plan hinges on Nicholas posing as Taggart, a chemical dealer who has quietly been arrested, but Usher doesn't know that. And also on using a teenager named Kieran to pose as Usher's rumored lost son from an old romance to lure him out of his compound. Nick and Grant arrive as Taggart and his bodyguard, with Nick being prepared by having an arm wound from a recent accident to satisfy Duval that he's the real Taggart. During their first meeting, Usher has a strange migraine-like attack, which Duval downplays somewhat. While Nick keeps Usher occupied, Grant gaslights Usher's bedroom with holographic equipment, while the rest of the team is creating a beach house on an island in international waters, which is designed to duplicate the landscape on an American island, while Kieran does some scuba dive training with Casey. Usher calls it a night by showing Nick an old collection of coins, saying they took a long time to become valuable, so his business with Taggart can wait. Nick wants to get to rush it. Grant manages to get out of the room before Usher arrives, but finds himself at risk of being caught by the guards until fortunately Nick is able to get a rope ladder down to him so he can escape. During the night, Grant shows Usher a vision of his son. The next day, during a visit to Usher's refinery, he has another migraine. Nick tells Usher about an American neurologist visiting the island, planting a seed in Usher's mind. The next day, there's a party at the compound where Jim introduces himself as said neurologist, Dr. Quinn, and shortly afterwards, Usher has another episode during which Kieran appears in the flesh. Usher and the guards chase him, but Kieran escapes into the water, where Casey waits with the scuba gear, and they head off. Dr. Jim then reveals that he's been treating a boy who has the same congenital condition as Usher and hops around a lot with his very secretive mother. He turns him on to the pilot who brought him there, who is of course Max, who reveals the location of the island in international waters where Kieran can be found, but not before putting on a good show of fighting with the soldiers to establish his reputation as a mercenary. The Kieran hologram reappears to Usher that night, and he makes preparations to go to the island over Duval's protests. The next day, Nick sets up some explosives at the drug refinery, but is confronted by Duval, who's received a telegram from the real Taggart, who escaped from prison. Meanwhile, Usher goes with Jim by boat to have a look at the island and manages to have a brief look at a woman who resembles his old flame, as well as have a pleasant chat with Kieran, finding they have some experiences and interests such as coin collecting in common, before being called back to deal with the Taggart situation. Duval returns to the compound with Nick, preparing to put Grant on ice as well, but is spotted and distracted by Grant and knocked out so that a mask can be prepared. A frustrated Usher returns to learn from Nick as Duval that he was forced to shoot Taggart, who turned out to be an imposter. Usher wants to return to the island immediately, but is told that the U.S. Navy is patrolling the seas, and starts to drown his sorrows by drinking heavily. The IMF dismantle their setup, and Jim gives Usher the idea to return to the island by air to avoid the Navy, mobilizing Max to take him back, while Nick and Grant head out of the compound and blow up the Colonel's refinery, leaving in a helicopter. The Colonel and Max find the new island in U.S. territory with Kieran waving to his father, and the Colonel doesn't notice the feds creeping up behind him until it's too late, as the IMF watch him being taken into custody. Mission accomplished. I'm going to give this episode a grade of C. As I mentioned in the outset, the plot has a lot of similarities to the Season 4 episode Phantoms. I was going to talk about the comparisons first, but I think I'll actually save that for after the rest of the discussion. Let's talk about what's good here. The good Gerard Kennedy as Usher, I think, is very appropriately cast, and I buy his performance. I buy him in his role, and I think he does a fine job here. I like the way that he kind of creates that sociopathic air around him. He blames his girlfriend for all the trouble she caused, which is exactly what sociopaths do, right? And his mannerisms, the way that he talks, the way that he acts is really, really good here. Like I said, I totally buy him in this role. Kudos to him for this one. William Zappa as Duval, he's a bit tame for a security chief. I wish he had been a little bit more formidable. I think that would have been better. He does a good job. I wouldn't say he does anything bad. He's not a complete moron, but I don't know. I just felt like something was a little bit missing there. Also about Usher, I'm not sure whether it's deliberate, but it seems like, with makeup or whatever kind of effect, Usher's left eye is partially kind of closed and, something like that. It's kind of a nice touch for a guy who I'm sure probably doesn't exactly live a very smooth life. So again, I really think that Gerard Kennedy, the actor, and the character were given a really solid go by the producers and the writers here. Moving on to something that was kind of weird. I don't know why the writers did not give a name to Colonel Usher's country for some reason. Couldn't they have made one up if they had to? I mean, obviously they would have had to under these circumstances. They couldn't have used a real country, I'm sure. But I wish that they had just given a name to it. I don't know why that bothered me, that they just couldn't make one up. It makes some of the already strained dialogue even more strained when you can't actually name a place. I noticed that in the final scenes where Nick as Duval leaves Usher's place, the car uses a flag, which I actually had to look up because it looked familiar to me. It's actually called an estelada. It's a flag style that represents Catalonia, part of Spain, where there's an independence movement. Don't want to get into any of the politics of that, but that's where this type of flag comes from. Interestingly, the colors are switched. The blue and the red are switched on the flag here of whatever country this is supposed to be. Another thing that I found strange is when Nick as Duval leaves Usher's place at the end of the episode, there seems to be some graffiti or something like that over the paint on the veranda, which to me seems kind of weird. Like, where did that come from? How could that possibly happen at like a presidential mansion? Very strange there. Moving on to the stuff that's not good. I mentioned that during the apartment scene, Jim gives a lot of details about the plan. Much, much more than you would have in the original series. Grant does have a little bit where he shows the hologram of Kieran. That was important to kind of establish that. Didn't mind that so much. But Jim talking about, this is what we've done to Taggart, and he'll be kept in prison for as long as we need to. And, we're going to set up a duplicate of this on another island. Too much for my taste. I wish that they had made more effort like they did in the original series, where Jim would basically just say, okay, so Max, are the arrangements ready on the island? Great. Nicholas, you understand you're going to be Taggart? Great, right? Without telling us too much. Again, it just goes into the whole, viewers are goldfish or viewers are morons thing. I don't like it. There are some other points in the episode where there is some strained and silly dialogue. The one that I noticed is in the middle with Nicholas and Grant after they take out Duval. They say some very silly and obvious things, which, it's just completely unnecessary Why do you need to do that? Also not so good. Colonel Usher seems to be ushered through the plot pretty easily. He takes the IMF bait and the offered suggestions very quickly. He's very, very easily manipulatable. He's lame, let's put it that way. I would not say that he is a complete schmuck, though. The IMF has to go through a fair bit of effort to seal the deal and get him to do what they need him to do. So I don't mind it too much. We've had a lot of lame villains over the years, and we've had a lot of lame schmucks over the years. You know, certainly I would not put Colonel Usher down near the bottom of the list. There's a lot of lamer and schmuckier villains than him. At least Gerard Kennedy is entertaining. I will definitely give him that. So I'm comfortable with my grade of C here. For comparison purposes, just to kind of look at this episode versus Phantoms a little bit. In Phantoms, the original episode, we had Luther Adler, a significantly older actor than Gerard Kennedy was at this point. I lambasted this episode and Luther Adler at first. I went into it, and I think I mentioned this during the original review, that I went into this prepared to give this an F, but that was really, really unfair. Luther Adler, he did have some physical difficulties, but they're not very evident. He did quite a good job in that episode. I do think that Gerard Kennedy is a little bit better, just again, basically because of, you know, just his ability to convey the image of a sociopathic leader, I think. Right? You know, it makes more sense when it's kind of a middle-aged guy rather than when it's a really, really old guy. The plots, as I mentioned, are very, very similar with the sociopathic leader that I've mentioned and, you know, the long-lost girlfriend and son. In Phantoms, Luther Adler's old girlfriend was dead. That had already been established. But his son had kind of gotten lost. Here, you know, the girlfriend is still alive. You know, at least that's what Usher is made to think. And obviously the son is still alive. I would say that the plots are about equally predictable. I think that this plot is a little bit better overall, but it does lose points for the amount of detail, as I mentioned, that was given in the apartment scene, which kind of ruins a little bit of the surprise as we go. So I'd say they're about equal there. And in terms of the characters of the villains, very, very similar. Colonel Vorka in Phantoms and Colonel Usher here in Holograms. Lame, not complete schmucks, and in both cases, entertaining kind of in their own way. So I ended up giving the original episode, Phantoms, a C-. For the purposes of this, for the purposes of the revival series, I'm comfortable with a grade of C for this one. This is an okay episode. It's average. There's not a whole lot to say about it. Not a lot of highs, not a lot of lows. So I think C is about where it should land. And I think that that's about it. Thank you guys, as always, for watching. It's much appreciated. Please like this review video. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And please leave your comments about this and other episodes. I'll be back with the next review very soon. And that will be quite the treat for all of us fans as we get a big callback to the original series in the next one. Thank you again, and I'll see you next time.